Okay, now we can do this. So I read 11-ish books in January and February, and we're going to talk about them today. I'm going to at least mostly go in chronological order here. So the first book I read this year was Lock Every Door by Riley Sager. I'm a really big Riley Sager fan. I've read a bunch of his thrillers and enjoyed all of them. This one I gave 4 stars, and this is about... Let's see if I remember. This is about Jules, who gets a job as an apartment sitter at this really bougie apartment building in New York, like right outside Central Park, called the Bartholomew. And she's basically being paid like $4,000 a month just to live there. And she has like no living costs, nothing. So she is desperate and takes this job, even though her friends are like, Jules, this is way too good to be true. She's like, I'm willing to risk it. And then she meets another apartment sitter named Ingrid, and they kind of become fast friends. But the day after Ingrid expresses concern and fear about happenings in the Bartholomew, she disappears. And then Jules is working to try and find her and figure out what it is that Ingrid uncovered that made her disappear. And it's crazy. It's as Riley Sager books often are. The ending of this was somehow more disturbing than what I had guessed. I feel like it's a little bit less out there maybe than some of his thrillers, but I don't know if that's saying that much. But regardless, I think I read this in one sitting. Like, I was sick for a day and I lied in bed and I read this book, and it did exactly what I needed it to do. It's told in like an alternating timeline, so it switches between now and then 6 days earlier, 5 days earlier, and so on up until now. So you get a very brief glimpse of like what happened to Jules at the very beginning, and it starts with now. A lot happens in this. And I got this special value cover. I don't really know why it's special value, but it was very cheap. That was our first book of the year. January and February, really good reading months for me. I don't think I'd give a book a rating lower than 3.5 stars, which is amazing. Like, majority of these books are at least 4 stars, and I honestly don't know if I've ever had that. I feel like January, for some reason, I always have a really good reading month. But the next book that I read, sort of, I'm gonna talk about a full series after this, but the next like individual-ish book that I read was Ruthless Vows by Rebecca Ross. I don't have the dust jacket on because I have it displayed on my shelf next to Divine Rivals because they both have the typewriter on the front. The first one says Dear Iris, and then this one says Dear Roman, which are the 2 main characters of the series. And I gave this book 4 stars. I really enjoyed it. I think this series is so beautifully written and so unique compared to a lot of fantasy books out there, which I really appreciate. I love Rebecca Ross's writing. It's so lyrical and descriptive, and you just kind of can perfectly picture everything that's happening in these books. I will say both Divine Rivals and Ruthless Vows for me felt slow. Not necessarily in a way that I was dreading picking it up or anything, because I was still invested in the story. It was just that it wasn't kind of like top of my mind all the time, and this book took me 2 weeks to finish. It's not even that long. I think it's like 400 pages, like a very reasonable length book for a fantasy, especially like the second book in a series, because Divine Rivals is a duology. But this one, we follow Iris and Roman obviously after the events of Divine Rivals, and Divine Rivals ended on a cliffhanger, so I was very intrigued to get into this. But for the most of this book, they're separated, and I don't know if I love that trope, but I guess because of that, we got more of their letters in this book, which was really nice because the letters in the first book are like one of my favorite parts of it. And then in this book, we also got a lot more lore and world building, which I'm a fan of, so I enjoyed that. There's a lot more information on the gods of this world because it's like a completely new, unique world in mythology. It's not based on like Greek mythology or anything. This is out of Rebecca Ross's mind. The kind of full plot of this duology is 2 of the gods are at war and enlisting humans to fight for them, and so we kind of figure out how it got to that point more in this book. It was a very good ending, exactly what I kind of wanted out of the series, but not necessarily my favorite fantasy series. Okay, next I did an acotar reread in January. Now, I didn't read all of these back to back. Some of these books were like interspersed. I'm just going to talk about all of this right now. And I'm not going to focus on it for very long because you probably know what this is about. I've talked about it many times because I have read it before. But obviously, started with acotar. I didn't know how I was going to feel going into this because it is like such a 5-star series for me. I love it, but I had read it 2 years ago. So I was like, what if I've changed as a person? I have not. I have not at all. I loved this. I ate this up. I I thoroughly enjoyed my reread of this. I honestly think I liked it more the second time. The first time I read acotar, I gave it 4 stars. I probably would have given it 4.5 on the reread, but I didn't change my rating because I feel like my first reading is more authentic. Because reading this, I was like, I know all these characters, I love them, I like know what's coming, and it just made it even more fun for me to read. If you don't know what this is about, it follows Feyre, who is a human in a world of fae, and she's living in this really small kind of human town when she kills a fairy wolf, which is apparently a crime, and then a bigger fairy comes and steals her away to his court. That's the word I'm looking for. To kind of pay the price for taking the life of a fairy. And things really just spiral from there. The plot of this book is so different from the plot of this book. Like, it's crazy. But I actually really appreciated rereading the first one. And I like Feyre, I think, even more the second time around. And then, obviously, we have Court of Mist and Fury, my favorite book in the series. I think it's most people's favorite book in the series. This, I loved rereading so much. Like, I already want to reread it again. I felt all the same feelings I felt the first time I read it. I love this book. And then, obviously, we have A Court of Wings and Ruin, what was supposed to be the final book of this series, because I think it was originally supposed to be a trilogy. So we have the big battle, the lore, the world building, the war in this one. So much happens. It's a thick book. Made me cry. And then I read the novella, which is basically a Christmas special with all our characters just kind of having a good time and recovering from the trauma of war, and I love this. I know some people don't really care for this. I love that it's basically fan fiction about these characters written by the author. It's so fun to me, and I like seeing characters I love happy. This book is kind of just like a candy read, like not much going on, but it's very sweet and wholesome. And then I did not reread Court of Silver Flames yet. I kind of want to, especially after reading Crescent City 3. So the next book I read, which I did read in the middle of my acotar reread, was Heartless by Elsie Silver. I have a full reading vlog on this, so I will link it up here. I don't know which side it is, but I won't go too in depth on this because you've already heard my thoughts. But this is part of the Chestnut Springs series. It's the second book. It follows Cade, who is Rhett's older brother from the first book, and Willa, who is Summer's best friend from the first book. And Willa is 13 years younger than Cade, and she is babysitting his son for the summer. Cade is super grumpy, super closed off, until him and Willa get into the hot tub one night and play a game of Truth or Dare, and all bets are off and so are their clothes. This was so fun. I ate this up. I love these books so much. I never thought I would be a cowboy small town romance girly, but here we are. I cannot wait to keep reading the series. This one I also gave 4 stars. I think I gave Flawless 4 stars as well. I liked this one a little bit less than Flawless, but I still thoroughly enjoyed it. The age gap I don't think is necessarily my favorite trope, but I really didn't mind it too much in this book, and the kid in this book was really cute. I don't think I've ever read like single dad trope, and I think I like it. One thing that I think I forgot to mention in the video where I read this, I am very emetophobic, okay? And that means basically I have a strong fear of throwing up and discussions of it. And this book has like 2 chapters dedicated to the son and Willa having the stomach flu. So this is probably a very niche problem, but I really struggled to get through those chapters, and it made me feel really unwell and anxious. So just a warning, I guess, if you somehow have the same issue as I do of this book, I honestly think you can kind of skim through those chapters and be fine. But it also does help kind of further establish Willa and Cade's relationship. But it didn't really affect the rating for me because, again, that's like a me problem. That's not a problem with the book. I think this is like 400 pages, and I read it pretty fast. And the tension in this book, it's so good. And then after that, in the same video, I read The Do-Over by Lynn Painter. So again, I'm not going to talk too much about this, but it follows Emily, who gets stuck in a time loop on Valentine's Day after she basically has everything in her life go wrong. She catches her boyfriend cheating on her, she loses this internship she was supposed to get, her dad's like wants to move to a different city, like so much is happening, and she just keeps reliving it over and over. But every day in her time loop, she somehow ends up running into Nick in various unfortunate ways, usually by hitting his car with her car. She kind of starts to get to know him and spend more time with him, and things evolve from there. And this was just super cute. A very like cheesy, fun, rom-com-y YA romance. Lynn Painter puts the vibe of a rom-com in her books. It is super Taylor Swift coded. There's a playlist at the end that has like all Taylor Swift songs basically. There are Taylor Swift quotes. It's definitely very predictable. This is the book I gave 3.5 stars, but it was very fun to read. Next, I actually read Crescent City, which I also have a full reading vlog on, so I am not going to go into much detail about this either. But this is the 3rd book book in the Crescent City series, House of Flame and Shadow by Sarah J Maas. I had such high expectations for this book. It's crazy. And I ended up giving it 4 stars, which is very good. It's a very good rating. I was just like a little bit disappointed and underwhelmed overall by this book, but I did really enjoy it. It took me like a week to read because this book is 900 pages because it's Sarah J Maas. And so much happens in this. I really fell in love with so many of the side characters in this book, and I mean, I love Sarah J Maas and I will continue to read everything she writes. I just feel like there was so much hype built up to this that it was hard to live up to it, especially after the end of the second book. So overall, I enjoyed it, but it's not like occupying all my thoughts. Now, next, I read Bride by Ali Hazelwood. This has been also a really anticipated book for me this year. This and Crescent City, because I was so excited to see what Ali Hazelwood did with a different kind of genre of romance, because up until this point she has written pretty much only like contemporary women in STEM kind of romances, and I really like her books. I love her writing style. This was such an experience in a good way, I gave this 4.5 stars. It is a romance between Misery, who is the daughter of a powerful vampire councilman, and Lo, who is the alpha of the biggest pack of werewolves in North America, and they kind of arrange a marriage between them to help heal centuries of unrest between the two groups. So this book like immediately starts off with their wedding, because they get married before they meet. Basically the first time they meet is at their wedding, and Misery ends up moving to the werewolf like compound to live there. Basically is like collateral. Like if anything goes wrong between the two groups, Misery will immediately be killed, and a werewolf was sent to the vampires, so then they would be killed also. Good times for Misery. This was just so much fun. This was so fun. I hope Ali Hazelwood writes more books like this. Misery was a really fun character to read. She still has kind of the vibe of a lot of Ali Hazelwood's protagonists, so if you don't like her writing or the way she characterizes them, you might not like this, but I loved it, and I think it was so much fun as a vampire to read her still being kind of like more shy and stuff like that, but very like honest. It's also the classic like Lo, though he's the wolf back here, is massive because it's written by Ali Hazelwood. He's huge, and Misery is tiny. It's vampire werewolf, and I've never read that before, and it was so much fun. It's how do I explain this? There's like differences in the anatomy of werewolves and vampires in this book, and we learn about it, and it's interesting. I liked it. It was something very different from most romances that I've read. I never really had like a paranormal romance era, like I didn't read Twilight or anything like that, so maybe this is the start. It's first person perspective from Misery, but each chapter has like a little quote that's in Lo's perspective at the top, which I thought was fun too, because you kind of get a hint at how he's feeling. There's like kind of a mystery aspect to this as well, and the world building and the politics of the world was also really interesting, kind of on top of the romance. So I feel like there's just a lot in this book to enjoy. There's kind of like a big reveal scene at the end, and I did not see it coming. So I loved this book. And lastly, which I am currently in the middle of reading, I'm reading Frankenstein by Mary Shelley, which if you watched my February TBR video, this was on it. So can we get some props to me for actually reading this, because I didn't think I was going to. I think where am I? I'm on page 69 of this book. I think it's like 230 pages, and I'm surprised actually by how much I'm enjoying it, because I was really scared that I was going to try and read this and not have a clue what was going on, but it's actually very easily digestible, I think. Like it takes a little bit more brain power to pick up on certain words that we just absolutely do not use anymore. It's not like Shakespeare-esque, which I guess is what I was expecting, even though this was written like 200 years after Shakespeare. The plot is really interesting, moves pretty fast. I'm enjoying it, so keep an eye out for a video that might be on this book. Those are all the books that I read in the last 2 months. It's 11 books, I think, which I'm aiming for 6 books a month. So there could still be another book this month after Frankenstein. It is currently only February 20th, so we'll see. Let me know if you've read any of these books, what books you want to read, what books you have read in the comments down below, and I will hopefully see you in my next video. Bye!